1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Guys!
In a row? Welcome to Nine Guys Dynasty Football. I am Jamie G. Esquire, the fifth master of putting gravy on every single thing, including dessert. I am here with Magnum Mills, and we're going to talk about the dynasty value of at least 9 guys. And yes, they will be in a row.
I am Magnum Mills, and I am not a captain of the yacht. I've been the captain of the gravy boat for about 30 years, and I keep refusing a promotion. Who would want to get promoted past being the captain of the gravy boat? Crazy people, that's who. And thank you for getting a little bit crazy by checking out Nine Guys Dynasty, presented by Season Gap Fantasy Football. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. We are on social media at Season Gap FF. Do not forget to not eat for a while before Thanksgiving. Build up some space to maximize your meal, and do not forget the flaps. Follow, like, and please subscribe. That's all we ask. Helps other people find our show, find our channel. Go ahead, if you can't find anything to talk about at Thanksgiving dinner that you're not going to argue over, just talk about Nine Guys. Tell them, hey, listen to this podcast. I saw this show about these guys talking about guys, about Dynasty. It's a good time. So if you have fun, give us that thumb. Enjoy your Thanksgiving.
I got some news for you guys. We've got games Thursday, Friday, Sunday, and Monday during week 12. And by the way, the trade deadline is bearing down upon us. No time for love, Magnum Mills. I've got some hard questions that require some very hard answers.
Good thing we're a couple of hard asses, right?
I forget where that's from, but I know it's from somewhere. Anyway, I got a couple of injured guys here that I'm not sure what to do with in Dynasty. I need you to help me figure it out, Mills.
I can do that, and I can actually tell you where that's from too. That's Running Man. You're doing a Running Man thing there. It's Killian. When he brings in both stalkers, he's got some hard asses. He brings out, I believe, a Dynamo and Buzzsaw. Yeah, they are some real hard asses.
Buzzsaw is a real hard ass. No doubt about that.
Buzzsaw, Eddie Batarski, I think. Buzzsaw, Eddie Batarski.
Let's start out with another buzzsaw here. Joey Buzzsaw Burrow. Joe Burrow, he's out for the season with a wrist injury. This is real life. I've got him as QB1 in one of my dynasty leagues. What are we doing here?
Unfortunately, there's not much that you can do. There's always the good old, like, people when Justin Jefferson got hurt, I saw a fair number of people who just traded Jamar Chase for Jefferson, figuring, all right, maybe I'm going to get a long-term upgrade by going to Jefferson at the cost of whatever games he misses this season, and it could be the whole season. So you could think about trying to do that. I don't know if you would. I mean, I guess theoretically, would you trade CJ Stroud for an injured Joe Burrow? I don't know if I would, but maybe someone in the Tua category. You get down to that kind of back end of the single digits, QB 8-9, with somebody who's a contender, they don't have any other options. Would they trade him straight up for Tua? And would you do that if you're a rebuilding team? I think something like that could be interesting. Outside of that, yeah, I don't know that Jake Browning's going to really be the answer. This probably hurts T. Higgins the most. I don't even know why is he coming back at this point? And Jamar Chase also been playing through a back. What is the motivation going to be for these guys? I think it could lead to them playing some younger guys down the stretch. Joe Mixon is probably the one who would lose out the most here. Maybe Tyler Boyd. Both those guys are going to be in free agency next year along with Higgins. So big changes coming from the Bengals. I guess the one long-term plus here is perhaps they get a high draft pick. They could spin that into a bunch of draft capital, get some cheap contract to surround Burrow and Chase and everybody going forward. I don't know if it's going to help them keep Higgins, but yeah, if you were starting any of these guys, it's going to hurt all of them. Maybe Mixon gets a short-term bump the next couple of games if they run the offense through him, but yeah, it's sorry, Cincinnati. You've had a good run of luck the last couple of years, and yeah, now you just got it both barrels.
Yes, we did. That's okay. This too shall pass. Let's stick in that division and let's head over to Baltimore. Let's talk about Mark Andrews out for the season with an ankle injury. And this is a position where there's just not a lot of optionality for top tier targets. What are we doing with Mark Andrews? Just toughing it out, waiting for next season.
Yeah, he is at least theoretically a guy with a handcuff in Isaiah Likely, although in a lot of shallow weeks he has been kicked back to the wire. He has filled in admirably before. Hasn't worked out so well this season, but you never know. The Ravens offense has looked a lot better. Andrews has been very touchdown dependent. Obviously, that's going to lead to somebody else getting those opportunities, be it likely, or maybe just more Gus Edwards touchdowns. As Gus Edwards is going to go on the magical run and be the guy who carries people. Long term, they're talking about how Andrews might be able to make it back for a playoff run. So I'm not too worried about long term value. That's a good thing. Sometimes they have to wait, have surgery. It takes a while, like we're seeing with Nick Chubb. I don't think it's moving the needle too much long term. The biggest pain is it's going to be, it's just going to screw you if you only had Mark Andrews. At least if you can go ahead and plug in a Trey McBride or an Evan Ingram or someone like that. Andrews hasn't been so great this season that you're taking a huge step back. But if you're going down from him to, I don't know, Gerald Everett or something, I mean, it could be pretty rough. Or you have to start a younger guy like a Luke Musgrave, something like that. Not much you can do. I wouldn't really be looking to sell him here unless you're going to be able to add something to him to get into a Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid. Can you, well, I don't know, would you move Andrew straight up for Kyle Pitts? I don't know that it's going to move the needle enough long term. I have those guys right next to each other in my rankings. At least you would have Pitts the rest of the year. But again, he's running, about the tight end 12. So he's basically replacement value right now. So is that really worth the bump? Is there a cheaper way to do it? If you're an Andrews owner, I would just be creative with seeking your short-term options, basically. If you don't have anything else on the roster, I wouldn't overpay to bring in somebody else. I don't think it's going to be that far down. If you can go ahead and, get a Logan Thomas on the cheap, I think you'll probably be all right.
Let's do one more here. And let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. Now, there's talks that he could theoretically return mid-December. I think he wants to. I think it's certainly possible, as crazy as it is. But I think that it was also dependent upon the Jets being relative in terms of their hunt for the playoffs here. Obviously, they suffered a huge loss to my Buffalo Bills in Buffalo this past Sunday in Week 11. Thoughts on Aaron Rodgers and whether it's this year or next year?
Even if he comes back, I don't know that I would feel comfortable starting him, although the Jets maybe have the absolute best remaining schedule for fantasy quarterbacks. That's what probably makes them the most interesting. I think the main takeaway here is that I feel pretty damn confident right now Aaron Rodgers is going to play in 2024. He's going to play for the Jets, and he's going to be out there in week 1. That alone bumps up his value a little bit. Maybe you could shop around because if somebody, I didn't really see him get cut. Most teams are able to talk about IR, especially in Superflex. He might have gotten cut in a shallow 1 QB league, but I don't know if he's on a team that's, really contending right now or something like that. I mean, if he's just on someone's IR and you just want to play Go Fish and just see if there's a smaller deal you can make, my guess is they're going to want a lot. This is just going to, bump it up again. If I had Rodgers here, I would probably ask for a late first, knowing I'm not going to get it, but at least have that as a starting point and probably be a second plus. I don't know that I would be going to do that now, but if you could get him for the equivalent of basically a late second to an early third round pick in a super flex league, I'd at least think about it. If nothing else, if he comes back, plays a decent game or two, you might be able to just sell him for a profit and just do a nice little flip ski.
Yeah, it could be a quick flip. Any concerns about the fact that he's the type of guy that could potentially just go on a darkroom retreat, take some ayahuasca, and just decide, you know what, I'm done. I mean, any concern? You feel pretty confident he's coming back, just given the fact that he didn't, he couldn't play this year with what happened for 4 snaps into week 1.
Yeah, I think his ego alone won't let him go out like that. If nothing else, you have to remember he gave up like $30 million to do this. He's still been very involved with the team on the sidelines and everything. Again, with him, all things are possible, but I feel pretty comfortable about this one, and far more so than I did even when he was healthy before he got hurt.
Well, let's be honest here, man. If you've got 2 healthy quarterbacks in a super flex league at this point, you've been very, very lucky. Most of us are now scrambling to fill our two, QB2 spots in super flex leagues after all these injuries. It's been a lot of injuries to the quarterback so far this year through 10 weeks. Mills, you ready to do some dumpster diving at quarterback in a super flex league?
Absolutely, man. Honestly, that can really work out for you at times. I've had that work out in the past, especially guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick. We've seen a version with that in Josh Dobbs. How many people picked him up at the beginning of the year just because he had a starting job and they were desperate? I think that's one of the few rules I always try to stick to, is that in super flex leagues, I don't do middle-class quarterbacks. I want the blue chip quarterbacks, the hot young prospects, or I want the cheapest guys I can get my hands on. Right now I would be going out there and looking at a Baker Mayfield. A lot of it is just going to be short term. You're not necessarily worried about the long-term value of these guys. If you're contending right now, you're just trying to get enough points to justify them in that QB2 spot. And, again, I'd rather do that dumpster diving, be it the waiver wire or cheap trades, that kind of thing. I'm very loath to go and pay up for someone like a Russell Wilson at this point.
Well, and then another good thing about doing the dumpster diving, it's always good to just check on a proper burial spot for Frank Reynolds if and when he goes. Shout out Danny DeVito, just had a birthday recently. Happy birthday, buddy. Keep on being Frank for as long as you can. We love you, Frank Reynolds, and always sunny. Anyway, back to 9 guys. We picked out 7 quarterbacks who you should be able to acquire in Superflex leagues at minimal cost. You're welcome. Then we each rank them based on the remaining schedule and any possible long-term value. Mills, please walk us through our results here. And by the way, we did do this completely separate. No premeditated thinking or talking about this one.
No, we try to think as little as possible when we can. I think that just simplifies things. At the bottom, we have Zach Wilson. We both had him last. The Jets do have the best rest of season schedule for fantasy quarterback, second best playoff schedule. That's a little bit of the lure for Rodgers. Does Tim Boyle, any of these other guys get it done for you, or are you just out on the Jets quarterback no matter what?
I think I'm out no matter what. And honestly, I think I'd be out even if Aaron Rodgers was in there. The offensive line is just absolutely putrid. I don't think there's any weapons outside of Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall. And I know those are 2 really good weapons, but there needs to be a number 2, number 3 thing down the line there. I just don't see it. I'm out giving anybody there.
I pretty much agree with you, although I would say if you're in a super flex best ball league and you can add them for cheap and just cost you fab and you have a roster spot, you could do worse. And against this schedule, they get lucky. Maybe they pop for a game or 2. Yeah, I think a lot of these guys are definitely better options in those super flex best ball leagues. Next up, Jake Browning. I had him second to last. You had him 4th out of the 7. And Bengals have literally about the hardest schedule you can get. 31st schedule rest of the season, 32nd, the worst playoff schedule possible. The only thing we have going for Browning is the great unknown, right? We've never really seen anything.
Well, we've never seen anything, and we know he's going to be the guy for the rest of the season here. And again, I like the weapons on the offense. You know, the offensive line is starting to play a little bit better. They've been relatively healthy, starting to gel. He does have the weapons there. It's not a matter of the cupboard's bare. It's can he deliver the football? Can Zach Taylor do his job to put him in a position to be able to, pop a little bit here and there? I think there's some upside there.
I don't hate it. He has the weapons. It would definitely help if T. Higgins came back. Next, we have Desmond Ritter. We're a little bit far apart. You have him towards the bottom at 6. I had him towards the top at 2. Middle of the road schedule, 17th hardest rest of season, or 17th easiest, I should say. 21st in the playoffs. So not easy on the tougher scale of things, at least bottom 3rd. Look, it's now or never for Desmond Ritter. I think he knows that. He has again, you talk about a good set of weapons. Their offensive line's been solid. They're not going to do anything dumb, and this is it for him. I don't mind taking that chance here that maybe the light bulb came on a little bit. You've seen a couple of flashes here. I'm willing to take that chance because if he does hit, he's probably going to have more long-term value than any of the other guys we're talking about out of this group. He is probably the only one I see really eking out a chance at some long-term value, except for maybe the next guy. So I don't mind taking a chance on him again, probably looking at something like an early 3rd round pick in a super flex league. I think that's fair enough. Jamie, do you just think Ritter's just toast, basically? Is that just what that is?
I do. I just have zero confidence in him, both in the immediate future and in the long-term future. I think Atlanta's going to have to get an upgrade there at that position this offseason, and I think they do at whatever the cost.
Okie dokie. Next up, we actually have a tie for who we put at 3rd between Tommy DeVito and Mac Jones. We are polar opposites here. I had DeVito at 2. You had him at 5. I had Mac Jones at 5. You had him at 2. I can see that he is the other guy who could have long-term value. You keep saying Kyle Shanahan, but that's because what he's done with quarterbacks and the fact that he was connected widely to Mac Jones before the draft. Even if he went to one of the system guys, I mean, what could he do on the Rams? Yeah, I think there are some interesting options, some interesting places he could go. Maybe Detroit brings him in to compete with Jared Goff. I don't really have a problem with it, but rest of the year, it's not even guaranteed he's starting. So again, you like what the acquisition cost could be there. Probably a late 3rd gets it done, maybe even an early 4th. And then Tommy DeVito, it's just a schedule thing. He has the 10th best rest of season schedule, the 6th best fantasy playoff schedule. He's shown a little mobility. They're going to some younger guys. They have Saquon Barkley. They have a good offensive coaching staff, and he costs you next to nothing. You've already seen him have one useful game. If he can have 2 or 3 useful games down the stretch, and you're hurting at that quarterback 2 position, I really think you could do worse. And I think he's bought himself a little bit of leash now. Maybe when Tyrod Taylor comes back, but honestly, if the Giants are this far out of it, wouldn't they rather see what they have in Tommy DeVito? Probably. So I think unless he really face plants, he's probably going to be their starter the rest of the way out.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think this to me was Mac has better long-term value. He's going to be a starting quarterback either in New England or someplace else next year. And he's going to get another shot. So, depending on the system he goes to, I think he'll that's why I had him where he is. I think he has probably the most long-term value out of anybody on the list. The lesser known DeVito here. I don't know, man. I think that was more about how absolutely atrocious Washington is than give him credit. But he got sacked 9 times. I just don't see that happening again. Maybe I'll be proved wrong and I'll be the first to come on the show and admit it, but I don't see it happening again. I think that was it. I think that was his.
Oh,
His
that
15
very well
minutes
could be
fame.
his peak game. But again, the cost of acquisition is nothing. The playoff schedule is decent. And I don't think Brian Dable is going to go into the tank.
I
So
don't think so
it
either.
is what it is. So just down the stretch here, again, there's only been, someone did a list. There's like 4 or 5 quarterbacks, starting quarterbacks that haven't really been on the injury list all season. And that's it. It's been a real mess all the way through and through. And that brings us to our second guy, Aiden O'Connell, both fairly high. I had him at 4. You had him at 1. Probably the most likely guy on this list outside of maybe Ritter to be under center next year for the same team. Doesn't have the draft capital. I mean, he's been fine. He did very good first half against the Dolphins, fell apart in the second half, turned the ball over, but he seems to know what to do, and that at least he's getting the ball to Devontae Adams. So I will give him that.
He's got a running game. He's got a defense that's performing, giving him opportunities. I think that he's probably better than what he's showing, but going through some growing pains. The more film that gets on him, the harder it's going to be. But I agree with you on Aiden O'Connell. Hey yo.
Oh, that was Aiden. I thought you were talking about Desmond Ritter. I'm sorry. I would have sworn from all those things you said that applies to the same reasoning I had with Ritter. Really, I think they're both kind of in the same group now, if nothing else, and similar draft capital, mid round guys. That doesn't really shock me there. At 1, we have Dorian Thompson-Robinson of Cleveland. I was pretty high on him, having him at 1. You had him at 3. And part of that is he has a little bit of draft capital. He was drafted by this regime, and he is a very mobile guy. We saw it during the preseason. They haven't really brought that out yet, but I really thought he was a plus rushing upside kind of guy. He could get you 40, 50 yards a game, the occasional touchdown. It doesn't sound like much, but 30 yards on a rushing touchdown is 9 points. If you just get 9 points passing, that's 18 points already. That's just such a huge upside. And the Browns are going to do whatever it takes to win. And they're not going to shy away. If they need him to carry the ball 12 times in the game, he'll do it. They've got a couple of weapons out there. He showed a little moxie on the game-winning drive. I know that they signed Joe Flacco to the practice squad, but my guess is they're going to give him every shot to hold this job. If he doesn't, then they'll probably go to Flacco and then maybe even back to PJ Walker before he would get another shot. So it's a little bit now or never, but I'd say he's got a leash of at least 2 or 3 games. And if he hits,
Yeah.
he's the one guy again. He's not going to supplant Deshaun Watson there, but he'd be at least exciting the rest of the way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And like you said, they're a team that's competing for playoffs. So I mean, they're in the thick of this thing. So that'll be interesting. It really sucks that injuries are such a major theme of this trade deadline, but that's just the way the season's gone. Nothing we can do about it. We've got 8 running backs with various degrees of injuries, and we've ranked them in terms of who would be, we would be most interested in acquiring. Go ahead, do your thing here again, and let us know how the rankings came out.
All right, and did these again kind of based on what the acquisition cost is. Yeah, obviously, some of these guys are younger than better than others, but they will obviously cost a lot more to get in trade. At the very bottom, we have Cam Akers, second Achilles tear. You had him at 6, I had him at 8. It just unfortunately, I hope he makes it back, but his value had already been falling for a long time. Second Achilles tear just really solidifies it. I've seen him cut in a bunch of short bench shallow leagues. Next, we have Nick Chubb. Just had this second knee surgery, likely to begin next year, on the PUP list. I had him at 4. You had him at 7. My main thing there was just he still has some name brand value, more or less. The longer you hold him, the closer he is to getting a return, the more likely you would get something for him. But again, not a guy you have to hold, but people still give the name a little bit of respect for the same reason people kept picking up Antonio Brown and Josh Gordon forever. Josh Gordon got picked up in every league every time his name was in the news for like a decade. Then we have a 4-way tie at 4 between Dameon Pierce, Antonio Gibson, J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins, unfortunately, is almost Cam Akers. It's an Achilles and an ACL plus in his case. Damon Pierce has just underperformed. Looks like he could get Wally pipped out of that job a little bit. And Antonio Gibson, been injured, been kind of relegated to that third down passing role. I liked Gibson a ton. I actually had him at 2 here, and mainly in hopes that he goes on to greener pastures and can perform well in that 1B role, similar to, say, what Jerick McKinnon has done for the Chiefs. And you had him all the way down at 8. Any particular reason you're so far down on Gibson? I mean, he wouldn't cost you much to acquire, probably roughly a third-ish round pick.
I just think there's zero long-term value there. I just, a lot of injuries throughout his run at Washington. They're clearly giving the ball to Robinson, and then you saw them come in with the backup this past week, who got not equal touches to Robinson, but got a bunch of touches. I just think he's probably like third man down there, and I just don't know where he's going to get like a vet minimum deal in the office. I just don't see any long-term value there for Gibson.
Fair enough. I think he's one of those guys that he'll be young and cheap, so you'll get a bunch of contenders who are interested in him in that way. I mean, think about how long J.D. McKissick hung around the league for. I think he has at least that kind of value. I would say maybe Samaje Perine would be a decent comp, maybe. So, not insane. And again, won't cost you much. Then at 3, we have Kenneth Walker III. He's got an oblique injury currently. It's the Seahawks. PD Sunshine says he's not going on IR. I still don't think it's a guarantee that Walker plays again this season. I think he probably does, but it always scares me when it comes to the Seahawks. I had him down at 6 because it's probably going to cost you an early-ish first-round pick to get him in all formats. Jamie G, you had him at 2. You still willing to pay that? If you have a top third, the 101 through the 104, you still willing to pay that for Walker?
Future value says yes. Again, I know they drafted Zach Charbonnet, but I think kind of KW the third is still going to be the true number 1 back there for the foreseeable future.
I hope so. I've just had so much trouble with the Seahawks over the years.
I understand the danger, the risk.
They're both second-round picks. If they're the only team that it literally wouldn't shock me if they draft another running back in the second round this year, because why not? This is just, why not just keep spamming that pick over and over? At 2, we have Aaron Jones, the oldest of the bunch here, 28 years old, has a knee injury. Again, doesn't look like it's going to be season-ending or anything, but he just struggled to stay healthy this year. Contract does run through next year, but I'm assuming it'll be a free agent. They did a restructure this year. Looks like it would cost you mid to late second to get him. I actually had him at 1. You had him at 4. My main thinking is, again, nice guy who's going to go to a veteran team next year for a reasonable amount of money and have a nice pass catching role. He's not going to light the world on fire, but he'll finish like running back 25 or something next year. Won't cost you much. That's more or less my thinking. How about yourself?
Completely agree with you.
And at 1, we have Devin Achane. It came in with a knee injury, played 2 plays, went out with re-injuring the same knee. All reports are it's fine. They were being cautious. He could have theoretically returned to the game. He wanted to return to the game. I had him at 3. You had him at 1. Again, the cost like Walker here is going to be an early first-round pick, probably 2 mid to late first if you're going to do it that way. So you're really going to have to give up some capital to get him. Just his size scares me a little bit, and I always think that the Dolphins are going to go with a bit of a committee hot hand situation. So those are really my only 2 points against it. I would gladly go there for a mid to late first. I wouldn't even hesitate. Probably even a mid first and a sweetener or something like that. But in this draft coming up, I don't think I'm willing to give up the 102, 104, 105 for him. Any thoughts on that? You willing to go all the way with him?
I think he's so electric and a big part of their offense from a speed standpoint. Something happens and they lose Tyreek. He's really their only speed. I just, for me, man, speed kills. He had monster games. I think when healthy, he'll do the same thing in that scheme. Yes, I am.
Well, don't forget Jalen Waddle and Chase Claypool. Although he's hurt again already, but those 2 are also very fast. They do have some speed there. Mostert also still quite quick. Old man Mostert.
Old man mustard. Prodigy from Mobb Deep once said, "It ain't where you're from, it's where you're at." Mills, I've got 3 players that feel like they're in Dynasty no man's land. So why don't you tell me where you're at as far as they're concerned? First up, we talk about him quite a bit throughout the season here. Najee Harris, Pittsburgh Steelers running back, consistently outplayed by Jaylen Warren. Saw it again this past week. What the hell are we doing with Najee Harris?
It's one of those things where if you have him, you probably spent the one-on-one on him or gave up too much in the trade. So you're very committed
Yeah.
to him, which is leading to him just being overvalued. And part of that is, again, the rising tide, the falling tide. The Steelers offense is just rudderless right now. They are aground. They need a new captain of the ship, and that start with Matt Canada and then go from there. Maybe it is Pickett. We've at least seen a couple of flashes with him in last season towards down the stretch and in the preseason. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater here, but Harris is stuck. I can't see myself acquiring him this season. Next year, if Warren emerges as the 1A guy like this and people start getting down enough on Harris, I wouldn't hate picking him up for, a late third in a best ball league or something like that. But for the most part, I'd say he's Damian Harris. And Harris is another guy, Alabama guy, came in, excellent college pedigree, a little bit old. Everyone's like, all right, he'll be fine. And he did. He scored some touchdowns. He had his one good season, and that was that. He's on the Bills IR now. I hope he's okay, he returns, but he's probably going to bounce around the league. Is one of these guys who goes for tryouts, signs on practice squads, tries to keep some relevance. And I feel that's probably where Najee Harris is going to be in 2 years.
Yeah, I like the comparison, but I'll just quip back just if I may. I think Damian Harris' game could potentially last a little bit longer in the NFL than Najee Harris's, but I like the comparison. Let's move on to Quentin Johnson. Son of a bitch cost me some serious buckaroonies when he dropped a wide open. Yes, I was on Chargers -3. Oh, so mad about that, but I digress. Quentin Johnson, Chargers rookie wide receiver. He's flashed, but he's been outplayed by virtually every other wide receiver in his class. We're seeing the likes of Tank Dell and Zay Flowers and Addison and all these other guys throughout the class here. What's going on with Quentin Johnson, man? What do you do? You're probably stuck with him. He's got zero value right now, in my mind. Maybe not zero.
I wouldn't say zero value, and Jamie G's so mad at him that he dropped the T. The man is Johnston, which is more fun to yell than Johnson for some reason. If you want to yell at him because when he made you mad, Johnston sounds, it sounds like something the captain in a Lethal Weapon movie would yell or something like that. One of the 80s.
He's lucky I didn't drop his whole life, dude. Like,
easy tiger.
I'm still upset about it. It's still fresh. But I'll live.
Yeah, that seems to be so. Look, this is not good. Not only has he underperformed to the metrics, he hasn't passed the eye test. That was a big drop that everybody saw. I was still actively trying to buy him because the Chargers have a pretty good schedule down the stretch. Keenan Allen is banged up. Gerald Everett is banged up. Austin Eckler hasn't been himself. There are targets there. Josh Palmer is on IR. They desperately need him to step up there. I was hoping that was going to happen. I knew this game would be tough. I am me, so now I'm still trying to buy, but now I'm dumpster diving a little bit. I was still willing to entertain that, early second round pick and maybe even in a super flex league, depending on all the other mitigating factors. Now I'm back to like, all right, I'll give you 2/3 for him. I'm still willing to go there because of the talent, the age, and the situation. Again, it's entirely possible that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler are all gone next year. He's kind of priced in as a sunk cost for the Chargers regime. He does have the disadvantage of if they clean house, the new coaching staff that comes in isn't going to have any allegiance to him. So there are definitely a lot of reasons to worry. I think if you own him, you're stuck holding. If you don't hold him, I'm vulture buying, but that's basically it.
So you're willing to go there, but maybe not go to Beirut and do a show there.
I'm not even I'm not getting an Airbnb there even. Maybe an Uber. But I'll have the dude wait. I'll pay extra for the Uber to wait.
He's Ubering in and out, folks. Let's go to your guy. You love this dude, but he's finding himself in a little bit of no man's land here. Let's head down to Tennessee, talk about Tennessee wide receiver Treylon Burks.
I would think like Johnson, well, maybe not like Johnson, but I think the hate has just gone too far to a degree. Yes, he hasn't stayed on the field. That has been on him. He has looked pretty decent when he has. He has not been drawing targets this year, but again, he suffered a preseason injury. I don't think he's been right all season. It might even behoove him just to call it a season, take a rap. I would like to see him get some reps with Will Levis, but I saw him cut in an FFPC league last week. This, to me, that's kind of wild.
Wow.
He's still so young, so much talent. That draft capital by this regime, who I expect will still be in place next season. Will Levis looks like he's at least got some potential as a young quarterback. They're going to have a lot of cap room. There's a lot to like here. Again, the acquisition cost should be pretty low if he's getting cut at this point. I think Fantasy Pros had him as like wide receiver 45. You should be able to get into that conversation now for a third round pick in Brandon Cooks or something like that. I'm still totally doing that kind of deal. Again, I'm not giving up a meaningful second, but I like him better than a lot of guys still quite young, has an opportunity ahead of him. You do have to worry about the injuries, but injuries are not really sticky. You could see dudes who are injury prone for 2 years and then they're healthy. Like Keenan Allen has been like that a little bit. People go through stretches where they're hurt all the time and all of a sudden they're great for a bunch of seasons. So I'm probably willing to take the chance that this has just been kind of random noise. They have been a bunch of different injuries. It's not like he had an Achilles or an ACL. He's just accumulated injuries to all random parts of his body.
Yeah. Yeah, he has. But when on the field, he has been phenomenal. So
he passes the eye test.
like
When he's throwing the ball, he passes the eye test. That's which Johnson hasn't. I think that's a big difference. So
yeah. Well, unfortunately, not everybody is going to be contending for a championship this season. That doesn't mean you can't start making moves to win the chip next year, though. To that end, we ranked 10 young wide receivers who might be interesting buys here for non-contenders. Mills, take it away.
All right. At the bottom, we have Cedric Tillman of the Cleveland Browns. I had him at 9. You had him at 10. Again, it just doesn't look like the Browns are going to be a dynamic offense going forward. They do have some other guys there. Maybe they move on from Amari Cooper, but I don't think he's going to be shaping up as a target hog anytime soon. Really profiles as the slot receiver after Cooper leaves. At 9, we have Jalen Hyatt, rookie wide receiver for the Giants. Young, I expect this regime that drafted him to still be there next year. I had him at 6. You had him at 9. More of a speedster, stretch the field guy. So probably never going to be a guy you can start consistently, but could be interesting in your dynasty best ball leagues. At 8, we have Jonathan Mingo, again, the highest drafted receiver for the Carolina Panthers. I had him all the way to the bottom at 10. You had him at 4. I do understand that this is a young, raw guy that was overdrafted a little bit, and he's going to take time to develop. Unfortunately, I am worried that Carolina is basically going to blow everything up, and he is just going to get lost in the shuffle. And we've seen this happen there. Same thing with Terrace Marshall, second-round pick by them a couple of years ago, who's basically never even gotten a chance. I mean, maybe he's that bad. I don't know, but I'm just worried that Carolina is the new New England, and it's where non-veteran receivers go to die, basically. They don't develop anybody, and they just keep bringing in these mercenary Adam Thielen types. Anything else on Mingo, or are you just kind of intrigued by the age, the physical tools, and the draft capital?
I think it's all that, and just the fact that, look, I know people are down on Bryce Young. And, if CJ Stroud wasn't having the year he was having, would we be that worried? Would it be exacerbated that much with Bryce Young? Maybe not. I'm still a guy who thinks maybe there's a chance Bryce Young gets better, particularly at this, throughout the season and in the offseason and then heading into next year. And now we've got, a legitimate big bodied receiver with draft capital to pair with him. So for me, even if they blow it all up, they don't have a first round draft pick next year. It looks like they're kind of stuck with this nucleus. So for me, that's kind of where I was leaning here with Mingo.
Fair enough. I don't really have any problem with that. I think I only have one share of him, and I'm just looking, I'm like, man, I can't do anything with you. And it just feels like he's going to be destined to be a roster clogger for a couple of years. At 7, we have another guy, highly drafted, who's wound up being a bit of a roster clogger. That's Rashad Bateman. I had him at 7. You had him at 6. First round draft pick a couple of seasons ago. My main takeaway here is he seems to at least be healthy. He's playing the second most snaps any receiver on that team. He's drawn a steady number of targets, and he's the only receiver other than Zay Flowers that's guaranteed to be there next year. Lamar Jackson has looked pretty good in this new system. The acquisition cost is low. Another guy I've seen cut in a couple of FFPC shallow leagues. So I don't mind sticking to a third round pick out there and taking a ride on the Bateman train and hoping that maybe he can kind of capture some of that potential. He did have a fair amount of success his rookie year and was looking good as a sophomore before he got hurt. So we've seen him do it on the field a little bit. I think he could get that going forward. He just needs to solidify the role again. Beckham isn't going to be there forever. And, God forbid Nelson Aguilar just keeps going somehow. Shout out Nelson Aguilar. Just, got to have better hands if you're catching babies. You don't want Aguilar catching those babies. That's bad.
No, you don't.
Any excuse to play the clip. Any excuse to play the clip. That's just a Philadelphia classic. I can't help myself.
And assisting people down, my man just started throwing babies out the window. We was catching them, unlike Aguilar and his mishaps. I like to put that out there.
We had a tie for 5 between Trey Palmer of the Bucks and Jaden Reed of the Packers. Mostly driven by me. I had Reed at 4, you had him at 7. I had Palmer at 3, you had him at 8. Reed, I would have higher, except he had a great game. He is now in that early second-ish range, and I am worried that it's going to be a little bit of whack-a-mole with these Packers receivers. I don't think Jordan Love is good enough to help multiple receivers get there in a single game. So you're always going to be guessing, is it Dobbs? Is it Watson? Is it Musgrave? Is it Reed? Is it Wicks? They have all of these guys, but not a big enough offense to feed them all. And he is right now maybe the most expensive of the bunch. He's right there with Watson. So it's a situation where if I'm going to buy a Packers receiver, I would just as soon get a cheaper one, and his price just went up. Trey Palmer has quietly looked good for the Bucks. He's earned the way to being their third receiver. He is the only one of the Bucks receivers I would say is guaranteed to be there next year. Even if they change coaches, I don't think you're looking at a full regime change. I think he could take the Godwin route. It took Godwin a couple of years. I remember I drafted Godwin and Kenny Golladay in the third round of a bunch of drafts, and it took 2 seasons to really get there, but I was rewarded for holding on both. And I think Palmer, if you're willing to show some patience, hopefully next year he breaks out. It might take a little longer than that, but if you've got bench space, I think he's a good tuck. Jamie G, you were down on both these guys. Any particular reason?
I just don't like the situation. It's mostly situational for me, Mills.
Like Mike Sorrentino, he says, it depends on the situation. At number 4, we have Mike Wilson of the Cardinals, rookie wide receiver. Both had him at 5. Again, it's an opportunity thing. Marquise Brown's a free agent. They have Rondell Moore and Trey McBride. Other than that, it's basically a blank slate. Kyler Murray's looked pretty good since he came back. If they don't have Kyler Murray, they will have one of the top rookie quarterbacks. So it looks like that's a good situation for a guy you can pick up again with that mid to late third round pick, maybe even early fourth in a super flex league. I think that's a solid flyer to take. At 3, we have our most controversial one by far. We have Tank Dell, who has been blowing up lately. You're into the area where he's going to cost the minimum of a late first round pick, maybe even more like a mid first. That made me put him at 8. I just don't know that I'm willing to go there, given his size profile and the fact that he still has not been very efficient. He's made some great catches. He's gotten it done on volume when other players have been hurt, but his efficiency has not been great. You had him all the way at 1. I think I just described what my main concerns are. I just don't think he's ever going to be a true wide receiver 1, either for his NFL team or your fantasy team. This stretch has been great. His size does lead me to a little bit of long-term concerns. And I think that the Texans are going to go out of their way to get CJ Stroud, one of those bright and shiny, awesome wide receiver 1 type of guys, be it in the draft or free agency. How about yourself, man? I guess you think Tank Dell is worth you're giving up that first round pick for him. You think this is for real and sustainable somewhat?
I think he is sustainable, and I think this will continue. The one thing they're going to do in the offseason when they talk to CJ Stroud is he's going to say he wants there's a connection. Some guys just have a connection with the wide receiver on their team. There is a connection there with who I think I'm probably more so down on is my guy Nico Collins, because I think Tank Dell is going to be a big part of this offense going forward. Even if they go out and they get a T Higgins, well, you're going to see rolling coverage to T Higgins. He'll still get his share, but again, I think Tank Dell is going to be a guy that can produce in this offense for the foreseeable future. I understand the size concerns, but you got to give him credit, man. People were like Treylon Burks is built like a brick shithouse, but all he does is get injured. So you got to give him credit here. You can't necessarily say, he's going to get hurt because he's a little bit on the smaller side. He's managed to pull it through so far this season, and all he's doing is putting up. I mean, this is record-setting type pace that he's on with this offense. So for me, I think he's clearly head and shoulders above everybody else on this list.
I have no problem with that. It's really just a cost thing for me. When I could get him for a mid-second, I was absolutely buying. I just tend almost never to buy high, and I think this is definitely a buy high scenario. So I would probably wait till it cools down a little bit. In fact, if they do go ahead and bring in a T Higgins type, I'm absolutely going to be buying Tank Dell. It's just, we're keeping the acquisition cost in mind here. And he's also by far the most expensive guy on this list. So I think we're simpatico there.
Yes.
You're just saying you're willing
totally
to buy
agree.
high, and I'm not as willing to buy high. That's basically what it comes down to there. At 2, we have Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants, still only 22 in his sophomore year. I had him at 2, you had him at 3. He's looked very good. They've tried to scheme ways to get him the ball. A little bit trouble with hands, but he's a dynamic athlete. He's got speed. And again, I think him and Hyatt are pretty much the only two Giants offensive players that are guaranteed to have some sort of role next year. Everybody else, everything else is up in the air, including the quarterback, including Saquon Barkley. It's a mess. I don't expect to move on from Brian Dable. If they did, I'd be a little bit more down on Robinson. I don't think they're going to press the eject button now after going to the playoffs in year one, after hitting some bad injury luck and whatnot in year two. Again, very dynamic player. Still very interested buying him. You know, again, you're probably in that third, fourth round range. Nice buy again if you're rebuilding. At one, we have the Ant-Man, Rondale Moore of the Arizona Cardinals. He's really taken off a little bit since Kyler Murray got back under center. Only 23 years old, still in his third year. I had him at one, you had him at two. He's in the sweet spot where, again, we talked about it before, Cardinals don't have a lot going forward locked in. They have him, Mike Wilson, Trey McBride. That is it. And he's already going into his fourth year next year. So it means if he is good, he's going to get paid be by the Cardinals or somebody else. I've always liked the talent. Again, one of these smaller guys struggle to stay healthy. You worry about that long term, but I think the right coaching staff could do wonders for him. I would love to see what a Sean Payton would do with him, what a Sean McVay, you know, some of these real great offensive scheming minds, even Andy Reid. I would love to see him utilized that way. That was the original concept with Cliff Kingsbury. He never really pulled it off. Another guy, again, I've seen cut in a lot of shallow FFPC leagues. Shouldn't cost you more than a third round pick, something like that. Jamie G, anything to add on Moore Robinson?
Yeah, look, I think the way Arizona's used him this season has been really creative, finding ways to get him the football. And to your point, if he finds himself on an offense with an offensive minded leader that can continue to utilize him the way they have in the running game and in the screen game, and then of course we know he's a burner down the field. I really like his production. He did a lot this year, dude, with virtually, you know, a turnstile at quarterback on a team that just didn't have enough talent, and no one really expected Arizona to be good. He's been a lone bright spot there for me. So yeah, I agree, man. If he finds himself with an offensive minded in a scheme that really knows how to utilize and get creative, I think he can do some big things.
Like Nas. No, he's into big things.
Well, if you're a contender this season, it's always tricky to balance how much you want to mortgage your future with increasing your odds of winning the season. Running back has historically been the easiest position to find and upgrade at, you know, around trade deadline this time of the year. And there's certainly some options this season. Let's go through these, Mills. Number one, we talked about him a little bit, I think, on our last episode. Devin Singletary. He has shown a propensity to kind of get hot towards trade deadline, end of the year, ride him into the playoffs. 2 weeks in a row here, he's been hot.
Yeah, he is right in the sweet spot, which might bring it into that late second round pickish range. But if you really look at it, they have one of the best schedules the Texans do for fantasy running backs down the stretch. It looks to be an ascendant offense around CJ Stroud, still young enough to be in play next year. I would expect the Texans to do the smart thing, save money at the running back position. I don't think Pierce is going anywhere, but again, this is a new coaching staff. He has to earn his way there, and so far he has not done it this year, and he's been injured. I don't think that even when Pierce returns, it's all of a sudden going to go back to a 50-50 split. Even if it stays 70-30, as long as Singletary's getting some of the more high-value touches, especially around the goal line. They haven't really targeted him a lot, but they haven't targeted the running backs, period. That's something I would like to see added to the Texans offense. Either way, Singletary, again, sweet spot. He's young enough to be good going forward. He's got a great schedule, and he won't cost you an arm and a leg. So he is probably almost my favorite buy of the contender running backs.
Yeah, shout out Motor. This is the time of year it gets hot. Let's go up to Seattle. Let's talk Zach Charbonnet. Now we talked a little bit earlier on about Kenneth Walker III and the oblique injury there. Does that influence what we're doing with Zach Charbonnet right now?
Absolutely, but the problem is his acquisition cost would be insane because he is still young. He was most likely a late first round pick, especially in 1 QB leagues, maybe an early second round pick in your rookie drafts and super flex leagues. Whoever owns him, this is what they've been waiting for. If you're going to buy Zach Charbonnet now, you're going to have to offer, it's going to have to be a Godfather offer. I like the talent, middling schedule for running backs down the stretch. It's not guaranteed that Walker's going to be out for a long time, especially if you listen to Pete Carroll. So probably not a priority here unless somebody thinks that they're being clever by checking out now.
Let's head over to Cleveland. Jerome Ford. I think the running game is going to continue to be the featured vehicle for this offense. I know that there's a kind of RBBC situation with Kareem Hunt here, but thoughts on Jerome Ford?
I'm not even worried about the split because they are still one of the rush heaviest offenses. There's no
Yeah.
reason to think that'll change with Thompson Robinson under center. If anything, he could really unlock that read option game for real. The Browns, much like the Texans, have one of the best schedules down the stretch for fantasy running backs. You can almost repeat everything I said about Singletary, with the exception being I don't see the Browns' descendant offense the way I see the Texans. The only good news is if Deshaun Watson ever starts playing to the level we've seen before, they could be. Looks like Chubb's going to probably be pupless next year. I think Ford is in the worst case scenario in about a 50-50 split, and he's still getting 20, 25 touches a game. The presence of Hunt doesn't really worry me at all. So he's another guy that, even though he could be a little bit of a rental, I don't really have a problem paying that mid-second round pick for him, in the hopes that not only will he provide me value down the stretch, but even next year. And honestly, if he does well down the stretch and you get him for a mid-second, I don't think you'll really have a problem selling him again for that mid-second in the offseason. You could run him basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go up to Green Bay. AJ Dillon, man, obviously another injury there to Aaron Jones. Jonesy went down. Is this AJ Dillon's time? And obviously probably a little more
The
expensive.
third
now
running back went down too.
Jonesy.
Not only Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon is literally the last man standing. So play the biggie, one more chance. This is it. Him and Desmond Ridder, it's shaping up to be one more chance week. They're just going to be blasting the biggie all the time. He's looked a little better. He's been used in the passing game more. He's had a couple of 30, 40-yard runs. Their schedule's tough down the stretch. I'm not going to lie. It's one of those things. If I sell him and I get somebody to pay me, that early mid-second round pick, I might be satisfied just to check out because his value had fallen off a cliff so hard. But if Aaron Jones does wind up on IR, there's a non-zero chance AJ Dillon becomes a league winner down the stretch. It could happen again. So I'm probably selling if I can get that mid to early second, and I'm probably buying for that if someone's selling for a third kind of deal. So I'm probably trying to middle it a little bit here, depending on your situation. It's a little bit older than you like as he heads to free agency, but not a lot of tread on the tires. We always called him kind of mini Derrick Henry or little Derrick Henry or Derrick Jr. or whatever you want to call it. But if you squint hard enough, you can kind of see the parallels between the two. Derrick Henry didn't do a lot for his first 4 seasons in the league either, because he had to, God forbid, you don't get Deion Lewis the ball.
So it's kind of like he's kind of like the distant cousin of little Jordan Humphreys. Finally, we're here. We always complain about the black hole that is the tight end position. I think it's finally time we did something about it. This is 9 guys, so we went ahead and ranked who we think will be our top 9 tight ends going into 2024 season. Mills, go ahead and hit us with the results.
All right. Honorable mention. We're doing 9, but you got to make it 10 just for the sake of it. Shout out Bo Derek. Dallas Goedert. I had him at 10. You had him at 8. At number 9, we have Kyle Pitts. I had him at 5. You had him at 11. That seems about right for you. I was actually proud of myself getting him all the way down to 5. At 8, we have Trey McBride. Definitely the highest riser amongst the players in the NFL right now. I had him at 8. You had him at 7. If he really gets home down the stretch, maybe he gets in that conversation for going over Pitts for me. So definitely a guy on the come up right now. At 7, we have George Kittle. I had him at 9. You had him at 4. The second oldest tight end in the exercise behind Kelsey. That's pretty much the only reason he's down there for me. And also incorporated with the idea that there are so many mouths to feed on that 49ers offense. At 6, we have rookie Brock Bowers out of Georgia, highly expected to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Jamie G, you had him at 10. I had him at 1. This is the whole Kyle Pitts, bright and shiny object. He's 20 years old right now. With that kind of draft capital, he lands in a spot. It's so easy to talk yourself into it. And yes, Kyle Pitts is the argument against it. But if you look at Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid, they're the argument for it. So I think you can cut it either way. And I think he's a guy, again, especially now without knowing the actual draft capital, the landing spot, people will be all over. But we're trying to predict, week 1, 2024. So you got to put the rookie on there. At 5, we have Sam Laporta. I had him at 4. You had him at 6. Then we had a tie for 3 between Travis Kelce, who I had at 7. You had at 2. I'll defend 7, saying if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, I still don't think it's impossible he retires. So I'm building a little bit of hedging into my prediction. Mark Andrews, I had him 6. You had him 3. Nothing really wrong with that. I'm a little less worried now hearing that there's, he might even be able to come back this year. Doesn't look like that ankle will be a long-term injury. But again, he's been touchdown dependent for a while, and it looks like the Ravens are trying to diversify their offense. At number 2, we have Dalton Kincaid, and this shocks me, but I had him higher than you. I had him at 3. You had him at 5. So look at that. I was higher on Kincaid than you. I basically had him in a tie with Laporta, but Josh Allen wins that tiebreaker over Jared Goff for me. And in number 1, not a lot of disagreement here. TJ Hawkinson, Minnesota Vikings. I had him at 2. You had him at 1. Anything really jump out from our rankings for you there, Jamie G?
Yeah, I think we're pretty simpatico there. I mean, obviously the Brock Bowers unknown. I see why you put him at number 1. I think that was probably our biggest gap. But
look at the top. How many rookies are into
it.
the?
Oh yeah,
the rookie tight end worked this year, and everybody kind of always follows the trend, and so now everyone's going to be real hot on the young tight ends next year, I think. So I'm giving him a little bit of an artificial bump up, but in tight end premium leagues, he is probably in 1 quarterback leagues. I would almost bet for certain him and Marvin Harrison Jr. are going to go 1-2.
Yeah.
Super flex are probably going 3-4 or somewhere in the top 4, I would guess. Tight end premium super flex.
Completely agree with you there. Maybe it's not so deep, dark, and black. Maybe there's better days ahead for the
They're
tight
getting
end
younger.
position.
There's only really 2 30-year-olds on the list, and they're both still very good.
Yes. I think that's about it. Anything else before we get out of here?
Probably same thing as last time. Just know when your trade deadline is. Don't make stupid offers. Don't spam offers. There's no harm in going into the league chat or whatever and being like, hey, open for business. Let me know if do you want to make offers, go ahead. Try not to be like, hey, Robert Woods, come get him. I always see like that. It makes me less inclined to want to trade with somebody when you offer guys that are, guys that I wouldn't even make my roster. You're trying to trade guys that literally aren't even as good as the worst guy on my roster. So don't overvalue your own trash. Sorry, Robert. Sorry, Bobby Trees. I don't mean to call you trash, but fantasy.
No. But say that for the people in the back, because we should just do a whole episode on ridiculous trade requests. That's what we should do. Trade offers. That's maybe we'll do that.
That's the guy who's going to tell me that Khalil Shakur is worth a 1st-round pick.
I mean, he did just smoke sauce. I'm sorry, Ahmed Gardner. Thank you guys for checking out 9 Guys Dynasty presented by Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. If you've got a player or a trade that you'd like to hear us discuss, please let us know in the comments or on the social media. We're at Seize the Gap FF. Mills, well, shit, you're going to give him all the details. Mills will take care of you.
Yeah, I got this. Again, 9 Guys Dynasty presented by Seize the Gap Fantasy Football on social media at Seize the Gap FF. He got all that stuff right. Just remember, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. You can find us on YouTube. And you don't want to forget those flaps. Follow, like, and please subscribe. It's all we ask. Helps other people find our show. We really appreciate it. If you had fun, please click that thumb. I'm Magnum Mills. He's Jamie G. And that was 9 Guys Dynasty.
We'll see you next time when we do at least 9 more guys in a row.
Oh, Biggie, give me one more chance.